So the first question is a pretty easy question, and we'll go right down the line if that's all right with you guys. What's an example of a campaign that your company worked with an advertiser on and an agency on that you think did a really good job from an online brand building perspective?
So as a run-up to last summer, we worked with Miller and their 64 brand. And for those of you who don't know, at Yelp we have a vast amount, over 11 million reviews of review content, long-tail content, highly targeted in terms of geographically. And so what we were able to do was work with the agency partner in this case and put together a concept around 64 things you must go do this summer. And so what we did was we built out an environment for this in combination with purchased media on Yelp. And in this environment, we actually took localized Yelp content, ported it over to the environment, geo-targeted it, and presented it in a fashion that was highly relevant to the user audience. The client also pointed other media assets to that environment, so when users were getting there, they were getting this great list of 64 things to do in their world, in their area. And the feedback that we got from the client and actually from some of the Yelp users was, great, how do I go bookmark this? And we're like, all right, note to self, next time let's go do some of these better things. But the engagement level was really high. It was highly targeted, highly relevant, fairly non-invasive, but I think the engagement level came from the fact that the content was so relevant to each of these users, and we actually continue to get feedback from it, and we're also working on another program with Miller for this summer. So I think that was one of the better ones for us.
What do you mean by environment? You created in an environment.
So we worked with a development partner where it was essentially we got a URL that was 64 things you must go do, and that linked from the media to the environment, and this environment lived outside. In this case, it was kind of our first iteration of this, but it incorporated active life content from Yelp. It also incorporated Miller content, and so users could interact with any of that content. It was highly personalized and geo-targeted. We've done some second iterations of this that incorporate today, integration with Facebook fan pages and actually embedding that into the Facebook fan page as well as the client site, as well as building out Twitter feeds that are following, the conversation going on around the page.
That sounds like a lot of work.
It was. It was.
Excellent. So it was a microsite.
It was a microsite.
Cool. Rich, how about you? And I think it was useful, Dave gave a little introduction of some bullet points about Yelp, maybe some quick introduction points about CBS Interactive, and then how you built brands for companies that advertise with you.
So CBS Interactive, obviously, it's companies and brands and sites that you guys touch every day. For the tech-savvy consumers, you obviously use CNET. For the gamers, you use something like GameSpot. What I'm primarily charged with is CBSSports.com, which is the online manifestation of everything CBS Sports touches on air and on radio. And it's a fun thing for us because we're able to do things online that you really can't do on television. Playing fantasy sports doesn't really have any representation in television because it doesn't have an application. It's mythical by nature. It's all user initiated and it can't be controlled by an external force. So the things that we like to do online are all about engagement. Our stock and trade is having over 7 million registered users playing fantasy games like fantasy football, fantasy baseball, bracket pool challenge, bowl game pick'ems, and those kind of things that allow advertisers for the most part to have a high level of engagement and along the way still build some brand awareness. So for us, we always have the dual charge of as a premium content publisher offering some contextual relationships for advertisers to tell their story or tell their message, but at the same time, if we betray our users with something that's too heavy-handed and it's too integrated or too customized or too forced, they literally flee. And we've seen that repeatedly. So it's a really delicate balance, and especially with something like fantasy football on CBS Sports, which is actually a paid product. So our users are paying up to $180 just to have the right to play. When you get 1.3 million people that are paying to use something like fantasy football, it's got to work for them. But at the same time, we need to have the dual revenue stream of advertising. So that's something we go back and forth on quite a bit. More broadly, CBS Interactive, it's all over the world, and obviously we're also in the mobile business, which is probably our fastest growing single business. And we have some smaller pieces of our business like Tech Republic that are really dedicated IT professionals. So we have pockets inside of what we'd say that is the broad online universe universe, trying to meet a particular niche in terms of the content we provide. So that's all stuff that's unrelated to me. I'm just more of a sports guy, and that's kind of the stuff I like to do. So
give us, you have a good example of...
Yeah, I think when I think about brands, one of the thoughts I have is I go back to my McDonald's agency days, and there used to be kind of a mantra inside of McDonald's, which is we always had to think like a brand, but we had to act like a retailer. And what that basically meant was we had to be true to our brand purpose, but at the same time we had to give customers what they wanted, because when somebody's coming at lunchtime, they have 30 minutes and you're trying to get $5 to $6 out of their pocket, you have to deliver on that promise, that brand promise. So in the case of building a brand, you have to think about, what is CBSSports.com doing as a brand, and what can we do to intersect that with other clients. And the one that I thought was really interesting this past year, I can't say it was unbelievably provocative, but I thought it was interesting and fun, was what Capital One did. And I think all of us have seen these Visigoths, which are, it's kind of a fancy word for a Viking, in television advertising, breaking things, slashing things, using their swords and their knives and doing all kinds of crazy things, and basically drafting off the whole Geico, it's so easy a caveman can do it. When Capital One as a company made an investment in the rights to use the NCAA marks and logos, which was a very, very expensive proposition for them, they wanted to say, well, how can we take this idea of these Visigoths and then create a brand extension and put them into a basketball context? So without the use of drug and alcohol, to think about that in the context of, well, how do we actually make that work is pretty difficult, because it doesn't really make any sense. You've got these Vikings, and somehow you're going to put them into basketball. Well, that doesn't work. And when they're advertising on CBSSports.com, they had to be aware of the fact that users like me, who are diehard college basketball fans, don't really give a shit about Capital One. We care about is college basketball. So to the extent that it can become integrated and it's entertaining to us, we'll give it a little bit of rope to hang itself. So the end result was two characters they created called the Ivans, which you're able to see very temporarily on network television, but they basically lived online. And these are twin brothers that played at East Mountain Eastern State, the made-up school. They were 7 feet tall, and their heads would go through the ceiling. And they basically created these characters out of nothing. And I think the whole idea was that Capital One was able to take their brand, which was fun and new and original and trying to break through the clutter of what you see with bank card advertising, and use these two guys only in an online context to have a conversation with people who only care about college basketball. So I think at the end of the day, when you're building your brand, you have to first and foremost be ready to build those brand extensions. And that can happen through advertising, and it can happen organically with the brands. And so for me, selfishly, it was fun because it was a good deal for us and it was a good deal for them. And it's something that I like to use as a test case to say to other brands, hey, you can afford to be a little bit new and different and still use video online. You don't simply have to repurpose the same $750,000 produced spots you put on network television to put online. You can actually do something new and unique, and that was a fun aspect of it. Sorry for talking so long.
No, that was a great example. I love the Ivans.